Where's the 60s music, dude? Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast asking for a presidential pardon and a $10 million donation to California Youth Services. Now, in the 1980s, video store shelves groaned under the weight of films about former American soldiers going back to Vietnam to rescue POWs. By the end of that decade, with the end of the Vietnam War fading in memory, it seemed as if this plotline had been quietly retired. At least until one film decided to try and give that story template a fresh new spin for the 1990s. So on this show, we're reviewing 1995's Soldier Boys. To help me review the film, I'm joined by a man who's only here because I've promised him a presidential pardon. It's Matt Poirier from the DTV Connoisseur. Welcome back to the show, Matt.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for having me. And I will try not to be too much of a juvenile delinquent during our recording. Excellent.
Yeah, you need to be on your best behaviour. Otherwise, I might spirit you off to Vietnam for an extrajudicial military operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I've got the toughness to be able to do this the way that these kids from the tough streets of here in the United States were able to.
Well, this is your fourth appearance on the Exploding Helicopter podcast, and I know you like to keep track of how often actors appear on your in the reviews of the films on your website. So, as this is your fourth appearance, that puts you, if you were an entry on your own site, that would put you in the same company as Treat Williams, Bo Hopkins, and Dean Cain.
Wow. Yeah, and I also discovered that I would only one ahead of actress in this film, Jacqueline Obradors. She's been on the site 3 times, so I'm one ahead of her. But I just realized I haven't tagged her for 2 of the other ones. So I only thought she was in this film, and then I did some research and discovered no, she's been on the site a few times. So I'm also close to her as well.
Oh, you're catching up fast.
Right.
But this film, as I've sort of alluded to in my introduction, gives a sort of new spin on those rescuing POW films that we saw so many of in the 1980s. Chuck Norris's Missing in Action films, Rambo 2, any number of Filipino shot, Italian produced B movies also used that kind of story template. So given it was such a sort of staple of 80s action, I wondered if you had any particular kind of favorites from that subgenre.
Yeah, I mean, Missing in Action, of course, with Chuck Norris, that was always a fun one. But I think the Italian ones definitely was kind of more my speed now as I've gotten older. So, I mean, Strike Commando with Reb Brown. I think anytime you had Reb Brown in any of these, I think that was always good. But, Brio Mattei, I always loved the way, I think we talked about Codename Wild Geese the first time I was on your podcast with Antonio Margheriti. I love the way that the Italian directors kind of bring that giallo, I'm saying giallo sensibility, giallo.
Get your teeth in, Matt.
Yes, I'm having trouble with my Italian this morning, but I was like that kind of sensibility that they bring to it. And then one dark horse one, going back to Reb Brown, is White Ghost with William Catt. I mean, I don't know if good is necessarily the term, but it's a fun one. William Catt, he's there. I mean, somehow his hair is like perfectly permed while he's been living in the Vietnam bush for decades, and you don't get a lot of Reb Brown, but at the end he just gives you his trademark scream to let William Catt know that he's got to come back to the chopper. So that one's kind of a dark horse one. Anybody who's looking for one that they may not have seen before, White Ghost is an interesting one.
Yeah, that is one that I've seen on various lists, and when I'm sort of doing the deep dive on IMDb. So interesting to hear you recommend it, because it has been one that I've seen from quite a few times. So I may now be compelled to actually go and check it out, given that you've given it the big thumbs up.
I mean, again, I would say, like, probably for people who watch, that are into these kind of movies, this one probably should be a little bit further down your list. Like, try some other ones first. Like, again, Strike Commando, I think, Missing in Action, those ones that should come first. I think it's almost like when you get it in the context of having seen enough of these, it's much more fascinating and much more fun.
Okay, well, I look forward to checking it out. But I think it's time that we got stuck into Soldier Boys itself. So why don't we see if the trailer can introduce us to the characters?
Ex-Marine Major Howard Tolliver ran the toughest high-security prison for juvenile offenders.
I do my fighting here now. Seen more kids killed in the streets than I saw in Vietnam.
But now, he's about to be ordered back into action. The mission, to rescue an American hostage held for ransom by a guerrilla army.
Bring it to the camp.
The crew, 6 of the deadliest inmates.
I ain't got nothing to lose but 50 years off a life sentence. Do me a favor, send me to Vietnam.
The offer, an unconditional pardon.
You can back out right now and return to prison, no questions asked.
This is the story of the Soldier Boys.
Let's get it on.
After the daughter of a wealthy American businessman is captured by a Vietnamese guerrilla group, an ex-Marine turned juvenile prison counsellor is hired to lead a rescue mission. Now you'd think for a task like this our hero might hire a bunch of seasoned army veterans or a group of grizzled mercenaries. Not a bit of it. Instead, our hero recruits 6 of the young offenders serving their sentences at the prison where he works. Naturally, there's no problem with getting these kids released from prison for an unsanctioned military operation in a sovereign country, so after a full 3 minutes of training, these street kids are ready for action and they trek into the jungle to find and rescue the damsel in distress. Heading up the cast is the American ninja himself, Michael Dudikoff. Among his teenage team we have Tyrone Turner, David Barry Gray and Shannon Rowe. The most recognisable face to me was Jacqueline Obradors, who's done a lot of TV work and was a recurring character in NYPD Blue and Bosch. The villain is played by the great Cary Tagawa, and an eye patch wearing Don Stroud turns up briefly as Dudikoff's former army commander. The film's director was Morneau, who's made a bunch of low-budget genre movies, including Connoisseur 2 and the Hitcher sequel, The Hitcher 2, I've Been Waiting, although he's best known to Matt and I as the director of the excellent James Belushi neo-noir Made Men. Soldier Boys came out in 1995 and has a 4.5 user rating on IMDb and a 37% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Most reviews of the film are not complimentary. A friend of this show, Austin Trunick, in his review for Under the Radar said, half violent war film, half after school hood drama, Soldier Boys is such an insane mixture of genres that it's hard to look away. And in his 2007 review of the film, the man we're talking to today, Matt Poirier, said the film was too silly even for the most seasoned bad movie veteran. So, with all of that out of the way, Matt, what did you make of your revisit to Soldier Boys?
So I guess I don't know if I'm kinder on it because it's definitely still very silly. But I think in the silliness factor, I think it's more watchable, I think, than I thought in terms of the silliness. I think maybe like just the fact that we go from Dudikoff working in prison with and again, it's a prison for juvenile delinquents. It's not like some sort of like juvenile detention center or something like that. He goes from there to just being like, yeah, let's just take you all to Vietnam and we're going to go, there was the whole thing with this character Brophy that I just got the biggest kick out of. It was almost like he was like he wasn't wacky. He was obviously he was not nice but he had his heroic moments. But it just seemed like the whole movie was just like, Brophy, come on, Brophy, and I just got a big kick out of that. And I think at the time, maybe I was looking at it like, this is so bad, I can't in good conscience tell people to watch it. Whereas now I think it's actually kind of a fun watch. The other piece for me is that I watched this on a much better, I watched this on my nicer TV that I have. I think when I first watched this, I don't know if I watched it on a small tube TV. I can't remember, but the quality wasn't as good as what I watched it on now. And I gotta say, when they raid the compound at the end of the film, it's sort of in the dark there, and then you get these really nicely lit up orange explosions. It actually looks a lot nicer at the end there. And so I have to give it some credit that the action sequences were a little bit better than maybe I gave it credit for initially. So still silly, but I don't know if it's too silly to recommend anymore.
Well, I think we do have to acknowledge that this is, quite a ludicrous film. As sort of described it, I mean, it's part teen drama, part prison movie, part 80s back to Nam, rescue the boys, rescue the POWs type film. And as I was mentioned, sort of Austin Trunick, in his review was saying it's just an insane mishmash of genres. And I think that's absolutely right. And I totally agree with you. I think your mindset going in, I think if it's calibrated accordingly, you can have a good time with this film. If you know that it's going to be silly and you're not expecting a great work of art, then you can have some fun with it. If you're, I can well imagine, you know, had I watched this on a different day, I might have just thought this is ridiculous and just be continually frustrated by the bizarre confluence of influences that are going on within the film. And I think there was a line in one of the trailers for this film which I think summarizes this film probably very neatly and tells you everything about that kind of crazy mix of things that are going on within it. Because on this trailer, in the kind of booming trailer voice intro, it says, "In the tradition of Boys in the Hood, Platoon, and The Dirty Dozen." And I think those three films sum up, you know, Soldier Boys perfectly.
Yeah. And the other interesting fact about this movie is that it only has one writer. And I don't know about you, but I feel like usually when a movie is just all over the place, it's because it's sort of like multiple writers that are sort of being passed down the chain, and somebody's like trying to fix it and make it into something different. This is one writer who conceived of this whole mismatch. So I feel like eating it. His name is Daryl Quarles, and I can only imagine going to his house for dinner. Like, you know, I'm sure like anything he makes is just like, this is bouillabaisse of just throwing things in the pot.
Yeah, and I can imagine any conversation with him probably starts in one place, suddenly zigzags to another, and then, you know, 2 minutes later you're over in someplace else. I can't imagine that you know, he methodically works his way through his talking points. Right.
He's starting about the early part of his conversations about the World Cup, and then the next thing you know, he's talking about I don't know, the Iranian Revolution or something. Yeah.
But I think, I mean, I came to this film very late in life, but I don't know what you feel. Like, I think if I'd watched this film when I was 13, I would have absolutely lapped it up, because I would think it incredibly cool to be suddenly like a young person foisted out of my juvenile detention facility and, you know, suddenly in the middle of some heroic rescue mission in another country.
Yeah. This might get to another point we're probably going to bring up about the film later, you know, with a tie-in with it. But yeah, and I think this might also explain to when I first reviewed the movie for the site and wasn't all that keen on it. People in the comments were like, "What do you mean? How did you not like this movie?" And I do feel like that the people that were commenting, I think they did watch it at a younger age. I think they watched it probably in the mid to late 90s when this first came out, and were, you know, teens themselves and thought it was a lot of fun. I think there was probably also a sense from them, because again, I wasn't watching it from the standpoint of like, I'm going to the video store picking this up. I think for the people on the site, they were people who saw American Ninja, like really like Dudikoff, and were like, I got to grab as much Dudikoff as I can. And it was like, oh, this is on the video store shelves, I'm going to grab this too. And so that's a great point that of course, you know, at that time in 2007 when I was reviewing this, and I was sort of like, you know, kind of giving people a hard time in the comments, just yelling. I think a lot of times my replies were just brophy exclamation points to kind of, you know, drive home how goofy I thought that was. But yeah, that there probably was a nostalgia factor for them seeing this, because it brings up all of those memories of going to the video store and grabbing what you can. And so in that sense, this probably would have been really great for a kid who had just seen American Ninja 2, and is looking for the next Dudikoff. This would have been a really great next film for them.
Oh, definitely. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Michael Dudikoff, because I don't know about you, but I was somewhat confused by the character that he plays in this film, because, you know, within the film we see this flashback, and in that flashback, you know, he's still serving as a soldier when his wife and child are killed. They are bystanders at a drive-by shooting. So given that Dudikoff is now working in a prison as a counsellor with young people, I guess we're led to believe that is what led to that kind of career change, and that's the sort of the first leap that this film asks us to make with his character. But now he's working as this counsellor. He suddenly leaps at this mission where he's, you know, invited to suddenly out of nowhere head back to Vietnam to rescue this girl. And he takes this mission not for the money, because, you know, he says, you know, if I take this mission, I want you to make a, you know, 10 million donation to California Youth Services. He does it only to help with the rehabilitation of the kind of young people that he's working with in this particular facility. And It just felt a lot to take in. It just felt like a lot to buy into at the beginning of this film.
Yeah, no, I agree completely because it's like, here's Dudikoff. His character's got like this. His haircut is essentially like what I would call the all one length haircut that I used to do in college, where I would just take the hair clippers and just shave it all down and call it good, and then maybe get somebody else in the door to help me trim up the back. But that's his haircut, and he's like. He's also eating with the kids, so he's like really trying to show that he's like really there to sort of rebuild. But the other thing is, it takes a second to even know that these are kids. Like I guess you have to keep remembering that when they keep showing you these signs that say juvenile detention center, that yeah, these are actual kids here that he's trying to rehabilitate. But it's like, yeah, he's like, I want nothing to do with this mission. I'm done being a soldier. And then there's a fight breaks out amongst the kids because one kid is getting revenge for his friend who died on the outside by killing the person who killed that friend. They're fighting, and then so the character's name is Butts. He's the friend of the friend who dies. He overhears this whole thing where Don Stroud, be eye-patched Don Stroud is going over the mission with Dudikoff. He overhears it, and suddenly in his head, his neurons are connecting and saying, like, oh, this is my chance to get out of prison if I can convince Dudikoff to take me along on this mission to Vietnam. So when they break up the fight, and Dudikoff is there, like, decking these kids, like, right, because when the fight breaks out, he's, like, literally, like, punching them like he would in a normal, like, fight scene in one of his movies. After he's done decking these kids and knocking them out and everything, that one kid says to him, take me to Vietnam, take me with you, you know? Then Dudikoff sees it, and he's like, I need to think about this. And there's almost a sense of like, okay, as a soldier, as someone who's, he doesn't just make decisions off the cuff, right? He thinks about it. But really, it's only like one scene that he thinks about it, right? Because the next moment he's walking with our eye-patched Don Stroud and the billionaire tech guy, and he's like, I'll do it, but I'm taking the kids with me. And I think that was part of the reason why I was not so keen on this film initially, because that initial piece there for me was just like, what just happened? Like, it just... You're almost like you're like in a pinball machine. You're just getting bounced around, and it takes a minute. And by the time you're recovering, he's like doing these interviews, these kind of hilarious like interviews with these kids, where it's like, take your feet off the desk, and what are you gonna do here? It was the whole thing just sort of out of nowhere. And the next thing you know, you're in Vietnam and in the bush, or I guess in the Philippines, but. Yeah, it was a lot to take in, and I think that's probably why I wasn't as keen on it. This time I was like ready for the ride and got more of a kick out of it, enjoyed it more, I guess.
I completely agree, because it's really hard to work out if Dudikoff is a bleeding heart or if he's somebody more from the sort of school of hard knocks type ideology, because he has responded to the death of his wife and child by deciding to try and dedicate his life to stopping young people, trying to rehabilitate young people who've become involved in crime. Now, if my wife and child were murdered in similar circumstances, I don't know if I could be so magnanimous as to dedicate my life to young, the rehabilitation of young people. I think I'd probably be trying to advocate for harsher punishments or death sentences for minors or something. I don't know. But then, as you were describing, within minutes he's just engaging in full-on fisticuffs with these kids. So it's like, okay, as I said, is he a bleeding heart or is he a sort of a tough taskmaster? It's kind of hard to get a kind of a real like grip or sense on his character.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even just the idea, right, like that I'm going to bring these kids with me. And they start going over their rap sheets. And a lot of these rap sheets are kind of the thing where it's like, do we want to give these people pardons? Like, is there... are there real? I mean, one of them had I think he'd assaulted a young girl. He's kind of known for being a sexual deviant. I mean, some of these were like not really great cases. Again, you could make the case that it's an indictment of the system, that kids are already at this level here and they've been institutionalized to this point, and here's Dudikoff here to try to give them a second chance and say, no, these kids are too young. I guess there's that other part of it, but yeah, it is funny. Like, there's a sense of like, it's like, I guess like boot camp is a good thing for kids, but it's got to be done by someone who's got a bit of a heart, I guess, maybe, that Dudikoff is the film, I guess, didn't have the capability of carrying off the Dudikoff as just various shades of gray as opposed to a black and white character.
Well, let's kind of dig into the kids, the teenagers that we have in this film, because one of the ideas is that these kids have to put aside their differences and learn to work together. So, the group that Dudikoff selects here kind of break down into classic gang groups or classic prison gang groups. So we've got one of them is an Aryan white supremacist. Then we then have a kind of like the Mexicans. The film this is the parlance of the film, not my words. They're referred to as the wetbacks within the film. And then we have the kind of like the black gang, like the homies, however we want to kind of like shorthand them. And this kind of idea of a disparate group of people being brought together is a classic plot device. As the film is kind of styling itself, it's like Dirty Dozen or the Dirty Half Dozen here. But I don't know, this idea that the group learn. They kind of do end up working together, but that aspect of the film, it just didn't land for me. I don't know how it worked for you.
Yeah, same thing. Again, it's this idea that the film had an idea in mind. So I think one of the hallmarks of the California prison system is that everybody is divided up racially. So you've got your sort of your Mexican gangs, your black gangs, and the white supremacist gangs. And I think they were trying to imitate the same thing and say that I think one of the hallmarks in the United States of sort of integration was that in World War II, the soldiers were integrated and started to sort of recognize, they got to know each other better, and that kind of led to the civil rights movement being more palatable for white people in America. That's the idea. And that I think this movie was trying to show that like, okay, in the prison system, they're all going to be separate. They're going to form their own cliques, their own gangs so that they can protect each other. But as soldiers, they're all mixed together and they all learn to like and respect each other. But again, the film just did not have the capability to carry that kind of thing up. So it was like, the idea was there, but then when you're watching it, you're like, why were they putting all these people together when they knew they weren't going to get along? And then they get along a lot quicker than you think they would because the movie needed them to get along a lot quicker. And so, yeah, it was a very fascinating way that again, it was the kind of thing that when I watched it the first time, I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't go with you on this. Whereas this time I'm like, I'm here for the ride and I'm just ready to see, let's see what they do with Brophy next or something like that. So.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same camp as you, because I think one of the problems is that the characters and their issues are so thinly sketched that the supposed moments of catharsis just don't work, and the whole overall film is just so sort of absurd that you can't then have the film take these characters seriously or take these issues seriously. So I think that's in some ways where one of the pitfalls perhaps of this film, because in some ways it's so ludicrous it works because it's never embarrassed about the fact that it is just so, I guess, so shallow and so shamelessly sort of riffing off about three different types of films, but it can't then change gears to actually take things a little bit more seriously, and I think that most shows itself with the Brophy character that you mentioned, because he has this scene where it kind of comes out of nowhere, where he has this kind of breakdown and he rips open his shirt and he shows the swastika that his father tattooed on his chest, and he makes this big speech, and I don't really know quite what I'm meant to think about it. And he ends this big speech, and Michael Dudikoff is stood there listening, and he then just says, "Time for payback," and they just have to go off and do the rescue mission. He doesn't engage with anything with Brophy has just said, and I just think that that's sort of emblematic of sort of the fact that this film really, it's not that interested in the kind of like some of the ideas that actually it itself introduces.
Yeah, and that's like a hallmark of the film, right? Because it's like they do it there with the Brophy piece. They do it there's a point where the character Monster, who's known for being a sexual deviant, he is about to assault they're partying at a bar, and he's about to assault one of the, I don't know if they're ladies of the night that are there in the bar, but he's about to assault her in the hotel room, and then Jacqueline Obrador's character has sort of a history of being assaulted herself, and so she points a gun at him and says, you need to, whatever. There's a scuffle ensues, and she's got a shotgun in Monster's face. Dudikoff comes in, breaks everything up, and then he's like, okay, let's go. We're going, we got to go. And I guess in that case, right, they don't have a lot of time too, because we find out the Brophy has, in his attempt to escape, has been captured by Cary Tagawa. But it's still also this idea. I don't think even if that had happened, that Dudikoff would have been like, okay, we need to really figure out what's going on here with you, monster, because this isn't good. And Jacqueline Obradors, I understand your concerns here. Like, we need to figure out, like, maybe we need to keep you two separate. Yeah, you're right. It's just sort of like these things happen where we get this, I guess it's like an attempt at like character development, but it can only go so far. It's almost like, heating a burrito in the microwave. They're just never quite heated properly. Some areas are too hot. The middle's not quite cooked enough. I think that's kind of what we're getting here.
I love that analogy. But although I do have to say, I do love the way that this group all basically embrace becoming like unofficial soldiers. I mean, they're just taken out of this Californian youth juvenile detention facility, plonked into Vietnam, given 2 minutes of training by Michael Dudikoff and a Kalashnikov, and they are hurling them. They're risking life and limb for the sake of. I mean, I guess they're also hoping to get these pardons, but I don't know. It just. There's no moment where any character thinks, you know what, I might have bitten off a little bit more than I can chew here, or I'm way in over my head.
Right. I think there was this idea in the 90s in America, because, the crime statistics have gotten bigger. And of course, in the late 90s, crime is starting to it's dwindling a bit, because I think a lot of it was tied to the crack trade. But there was this idea that inner city America was the most dangerous place in the world, and that you could essentially take the people that were living in inner city America, you could put them, they would be tougher than anybody else's soldiers or something like that. Which again is just a completely ludicrous concept, because again, you're talking about, like, in Vietnam, these other, Cary Tagawa's militia group, they are trained soldiers. They're trained to do, to use their terrain. They're trained to hold assault weapons properly. They're trained to scout areas, all of that, to set traps, all of those kinds of things. And, somebody who was in the inner city can't just show up in Vietnam and suddenly start, but I think that was supposed to be the concept there of that like, no, let's do that. Let's put that in a movie. And so what we see is this huge leap of faith that somebody who is used to shooting a rival gang member, or someone like in Jacqueline Obrador's case, who attacks her assaulter and kills her assaulter and ends up going into prison for that, give them an AR-15, give them some heavy combat boots and a map, and they should be all set.
Well, one thing I did want to point out was, we've been talking about this group as if they are. I guess the idea is that they're meant to be teenagers because they're all in this youth detention facility. But I looked up the ages of the actors that are involved here. Tyrone Turner was 23 when he made this. Channon Rowe, who plays Brophy, was 26. Demetrius Navarro, who's Lopez, was 25. Cedric Terrell, kind of hard to work out exactly how old he is, but from sort of reading between the lines of his life and CV, I think he was about 27 when he made this. And Jacqueline Obradors was 29. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she'd just been, maybe the kind of like the bureaucrats at this juvenile detention facility, not too up on their paperwork. Maybe she's just been sort of lost in the system, and that's why she's still there at this juvenile detention facility, despite the fact she's about to hit 30.
Right. Well, because we have the character, the daughter character, right, who's been captured, and they're going to rescue her, and she's been doing all this like volunteer work for the UN. We assume for a certain period of time. She's the same age as Jacqueline Obradors, so it's like, we're supposed to believe that Jacqueline Obradors is a teenager, and this other woman, Nicole Hansen plays the character, that she's supposed to be this sort of hardened, that she's not a teenager, right? That she's an adult who's been living her life as an adult for all these years, working for the UN. So yeah, the joke is we always joke about like the TV show Beverly Hills 90210, where you had Luke Perry as the late Luke Perry as a teenager, and he was in his late 20s, and they would always joke about that like, that was kind of like the standard for teens that were adults in movies. But I mean, the thing too is, like, a lot of times these people, sometimes look younger. But Jacqueline Ober is not to say that she looked old per se, but she looked like an adult. I mean, and if you look at her CV, she's playing adult roles around the same time that she's playing the teenager.
Yeah, it's hard to quite understand, why she took this role or how she got offered this role, because she is so far out of the age range that of the character that she's playing. But she does a good job here. She's good in this film. I enjoyed the Jacqueline Obradors foo that we get to see within this film. But this film, as we've alluded to, picks up on the kind of classic 80s Vietnam films, and it repeats many of the riffs that we grew so familiar with from watching those particular movies. So, we get kind of classic genre tropes like the exploding guard tower, the slow motion shot of injured soldiers running for cover. One of the characters even says, Vietnam, just like the movies. So clearly, sort of all of this is very knowing. And so, Matt, I kind of wondered, what you made of all this. Did you think it was a tribute, pastiche, rip-off, homage? What did you make of this element of the film?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, again, when I first saw this in '07, I'd only seen like kind of a smattering of the Italian ones, and I'd seen more of the canon ones that we, like the Rambo, which I don't know if it's canon, but like Missing in Action, those kinds of ones. So I kind of had the sense of it being more of a ripoff, but now I think watching it now, I think for the types of exploding huts that we get in this and exploding towers and things like that, I kind of appreciate, I think they looked better than a lot of these sort of ripoffs do. So there's that part of it. I think it is. I think homage might be, I mean, maybe I'm being too generous with homage here. It might just be like, hey, let's just throw a bunch of people in, and we've got a cheap set in the Philippines that we can work on, and it's already created. I mean the town that they use in Vietnam looks like it was a set that had been used in other things before. I did notice they had a faux restaurant, which I like the idea that in Vietnam, you get the faux restaurant, and it's right there for Westerners to go get their meals. But it did look like they were taking advantage of having everything there for them. So maybe I'm giving them too much credit by saying homage, but at least for people that like this kind of movie, it's a fun entry in that sense. So maybe in terms of this, it's maybe not homage, ripoff. You could go kind of either way on that, but I think it's kind of a fun one for people that like this kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, if of all of the words that I threw out there in terms of how to label this, I think I'd probably land on homage myself. There do seem to be a couple of very blatant lifts from other films. So we see Monster, he's captured, and he has a sack put over his head with a snake inside it, and kind of meant to believe the snake's going to bite him. But as we find out, he's bitten the head off the snake inside the sack, which is a very blatant lift from Missing in Action with Chuck Norris when he bites the head off a rat when somebody does something similar with him in that film. And there's the classic trope from all of these types of films of a couple of soldiers like suddenly emerging up out of the water, out of this river that they're in, to take out a couple of goons that are in this. And that's something that we've seen multiple times in these types of Vietnam films like Rambo. And so I think those are such blatant lifts. And I guess kind of there's some this film comes sort of 10 years or 10 years or plus since those films. So I kind of feel like it's more homage because those films were in the past. They'd kind of largely sort of died out by this point in the 90s. So I think I would be inclined to go for that more generous interpretation myself.
Yeah, I mean, especially just thinking about the tower explosions, there's almost a sense the way that they set it up where it's just like Dudikoff goes in, does reconnaissance, comes back, and he's like, here are the guard towers, we need to blow them up. And it's almost like the fact that it was so deliberate, the way that they approached it, like you say, it feels more homage in that sense.
Now, there's another point of interest I wanted to talk to you about concerning Soldier Boys, and that is the fact that in 1997, a couple of years after this film came out, a Soldier Boys computer game came out on PC. It was a shooter that retells the story of the film and actually uses footage from the actual film. And interestingly, making a video game was clearly part of the plan when making the film, because within the game, the actors from the film perform short scenes that are designed to explain or move the game along. Now, fortunately, Matt and I were able to get a flavour of the game by watching a video of a playthrough that has been uploaded to YouTube. So, yeah, Matt, what did you make of Soldier Boys, the video game?
So I really appreciate it when you mentioned that you found it on YouTube, because I didn't even think to look on YouTube for a playthrough of this. I'd always seen on IMDb that this video game existed, and I was always curious to know how it came off. And I think it seemed a little bit clunky. I mean, I have to kind of go back to my own self of like what 90s CD-ROM, because I think it was a CD-ROM game, PC CD-ROM game. And I think for people at that time, it might have looked cool, but it just also seemed like I was watching it and I was like, how do you lose this game? And it also seemed like it was a very quick game to play through that, like, I don't know if I spent a certain amount of money on it, I don't know how I would have felt about it, but it was very interesting to see the scenes that, like you said, were clearly shot just for the video game, that they had no intention of putting in the movie, because the video game takes the story goes in a slightly different path in certain ways. And I was really fascinated to see the way that they took some of those. In some ways, I almost would have liked it if the movie had gone with some of those ideas.
Well, I mean, I think, you were trying to understand the quality of this game, and fortunately there's on the sort of my research, I was able to sort of come up with a few reviews from this computer game, and Computer Games Strategy Plus described Soldier Boys the game as one of the worst games of the last few years with no redeeming qualities. GameSpot said it doesn't look good and it doesn't play good. And Computer Gaming World described the graphics as akin to being shot through a scuba mask smeared with Vaseline.
Okay, so because I just looked at the cover that had this unrivaled in the area of PC shooters from, I don't know what the company, Digital Game something. That's like on the cover of that they have on the image on IMDb. So I just thought, well, maybe people like this more than I did, and I was just looking at it with modern lens. But no, it's good to know that people in that time period felt the same way that I felt in watching it. With the shot through the scuba lens might be the best. That actually was a good description. Yeah,
I mean, just watching the video, it did look pretty terrible. I mean, the gameplay looked incredibly repetitive. As well. But I just found it really fascinating that, they had this idea of, we're going to make this straight-to-video movie, but you know what? We're also going to create a tie-in computer game at the same time. And that feels like such a random... I mean, nobody would do that today. In terms of, we're making a low-budget action film. Let's have a tie-in video game that we're going to kind of make at the same time. I guess... the computer game industry was very different at that particular time.
Yeah, well, because I think one of the big things is just looking at it was what your comment you made earlier about how if you were a kid watching this, the idea of being a kid who goes to Vietnam with Michael Dudikoff and is being a soldier could be really exciting. And maybe that's where they thought of the idea, like, oh, this idea of it being a movie, a video game would be great too, because now these kids who are watching the film and putting themselves in the place of, hopefully not Brophy, but maybe some of the other characters, they put themselves into that place. Now they can actually play it. They can actually be them. But the only thing, of course, with that, right, is that you don't actually get to be them either. You're still playing the part of Brophy or Lamb or whoever the characters were. It would have been interesting maybe if they had just said, like, you get to pick one of two. You get to be either the man or the woman, and then you're helping out Dudikoff in this, and then the other crew's with you there, maybe you get to pick your crime as well. I don't know.
Well, there's an interesting point about this video game that I want to mention, because, when I was doing my research into the video game, I noticed that the video game had a very interesting credit. And, when we were having our little pre-show chat, I mentioned that to you, and you were able to kind of fill in the other half of that equation for me. So, when I was, as I say, when I was doing my research, I noticed that the video game is directed by two people. somebody called Jed Weintraub, who I've never heard of. The other credited director for Soldier Boys, the video game, is none other than Darren Aronofsky. He of Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan, the Wrestler. But as I say, Matt, you were able to sort of actually provide me with the answer as to why on earth he was involved in this video game.
Yeah, I watch the credits, which this has become a sort of a habit of mine when I watch movies for, whether it's for podcasts or for, just in general, I watch the credits and just to see if any names pop up that I recognize. And his name popped up as one of the second unit directors. And of course, if there's anybody else in the film that's interesting, I missed that because I immediately picked up my phone and went to IMDb to find out if this was in fact the Darren Aronofsky. And of course, his picture's right there and it's him. So yeah, I guess, he was second unit director on this film, which was just, of all the people to see in this, I think, we thought Jacqueline Obradors was the biggest name to come out of this, but no, turns out that we have a Darren Aronofsky of all people. Has he been nominated for an Oscar before? I think he's an Oscar nominated. So I always get a kick out of it whenever I get Oscar winners or Oscar nominees in these direct to video movies.
So yeah, it kind of makes sense that he would be credited as one of the directors for the video game because, as the second unit director, you would imagine that he would have been tasked with shooting those little bits of video that then got used specifically for the video game because, the main director, what's his name, Morneau, he wouldn't be bothered to do that. He's got, he's too busy trying to, put the rest of the film together. And that, that's a kind of task that you could totally imagine that would just be delegated down to him. And I guess that was the reason why he gets, credited as a director on the game because he's, as I say, as we talked about, the film does have so much footage from the film and does have a lot of footage which was clearly just shot specifically for the video game. You mentioned the fact that the story in the video game doesn't follow the story of the film in exactly the same way, and tragically for Exploding Helicopter fans, that involves the exploding helicopter which plays a very prominent role in the film but does not play any role within the video game, which is terrible oversight, which I guess I now need to hold against Darren Aronofsky.
Right. That's the decision, I guess. I do kind of wonder with some of those reviews that you talked about there that gave this a poor, the video game magazines that gave this a poor review. I wonder if those reviews would have gone up a tick if as the player, you had the opportunity to blow up the helicopter.
Whether you put an exploding helicopter in your game or whether you put an exploding helicopter in your movie, it is always going to correspond to kind of like, an uptick in, the critical appraisal of whatever it is, whatever cultural product you're putting together. So, I completely endorse that particular message. But, I think we're going to take a quick break now, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding helicopter action.
Combine the power of gymnastics with the force of karate, and an all-new martial art is born. Jim Kata. Kurt Thomas, three-time world gymnastics champion, takes on a secret mission for the United States government. His only weapon, Jim Kata. And that's all he needs. Jim Kata, rated R.
Starts Friday. Check newspapers for a theater near you.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. This occurs at the end of the film as Dudikoff and his teenage protégés are seeking to make their escape after rescuing the girl. After blowing up the rebels' camp, they are pursued by a helicopter piloted by Cary Tagawa. The two foes exchange machine gun fire before Mikey Duds whips out a rocket launcher and takes out the bothersome chopper. So, Matt, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
Yeah, well, I thought that it wasn't that the rocket launcher. I thought it didn't work, and I thought he had to use the remote control to blow that Butts used his remote control because he had placed a bomb in there.
You're absolutely right, Matt. This is a very sloppy script that I've put together.
No, because the reason why it stuck out to me was because Tagawa is like flying around, shooting at them with rockets from the helicopter, and they're like dodging these rockets and all this stuff. And then Dudikoff goes to try to blow it up, and then the rocket launcher doesn't work. And then, earlier we get the scene where Butts plants the bomb in the helicopter. And I thought the way that this was all playing out was that bomb blew up a helicopter that led to the blowing up of the entire compound, and that this was a different helicopter. But then after all this stuff happens, and they're almost, blown up by this, by Tagawa, the helicopter, he's aiming one last missile to kind of blow them up. And Butts is like, oh, hey, I got this remote here. I'm just going to blow it up. And it's like, why didn't you do that, like, way back, when and they didn't even make a comment of, like, he forgot that he had it or anything like that. Like, it was kind of like, you could have done this a long time ago. So I think the way you described it would have been better if you'd used the rocket launcher, because at least it would have made more sense.
But I guess it does give Butts a kind of heroic moment that he's the one that saves Dudikoff and the rest of the gang at that particular moment. But I was a bit disappointed by the exploding helicopter here, because there's a very clear, quick edit to some stock footage of an exploding helicopter, and it's I think they've cropped the shot of the exploding helicopter to probably disguise the fact that it is a completely different helicopter that is being blown up in this stock footage. So it's probably a bit of a way of disguising the editing that they've done. And I think that for me, that was a bit of a shame that we don't get something that is a little bit done with a little bit more quality, because this is the big ending of the film. This is them defeating the final boss. It is them defeating the big villain of the piece, Cary Tagawa. So I was a little bit disappointed by the employment of stock footage in such a crucial scene.
Yeah, and I agree too, because the film actually sets a better standard in the compound. There's that really fantastic one where, of the 3 towers that get blown up, one of the 3 that the bomb doesn't work, and so Lamb goes up there and he commandeers the tower. He's like shooting at baddies from the tower, and then he, in his escape from the tower, because he realizes they're about to blow up the tower, he's on a zip line. He attaches his gun, like I think it's the trigger, like the trigger guard of the gun or something. He attaches it to, or something he attaches with the gun to this zip cord, and he's like zipping down, hanging onto the gun, shooting people while they blow up the tower. And it was actually a really great scene in terms of, action, explosions, and that kind of thing goes. So they had set a really great standard for that kind of thing, and for it to just be so pedestrian with that last one there, it's almost like they created a standard that they couldn't live up to.
Yeah, I would completely agree. It is there's some really good explosions in this film. There's some good action in here, and it's a bit of a shame that they didn't meet the standard they'd set elsewhere in their film in that particular final scene. But there were a couple of other points of exploding helicopter trivia that I wanted to mention. So the director Morneau here, he's also directed another film with an exploding helicopter, the Connoisseur 2, which basically the exploding helicopter there is very entertaining, because it completely rips off. Well, the whole film is an Aliens ripoff, and the exploding helicopter sequence in that film completely is almost a shot-for-shot remake of the kind of dropship crash from Aliens. So it's a very sort of, as I say, almost shot for shot. It's a very entertaining reworking / rip-off. But the other thing I wanted to point out was that I actually need to update my website, because I have just realised that Michael Dudikoff has actually been in 8 films with an exploding helicopter, which would put him in our Hall of Fame of actors who've been in the most films with an exploding helicopter.
Wow, so that might put him in the trifecta then. I'm curious, so because I know he's in my Hall of Fame. He's been since like kind of early on, and I think that there's that Comeuppance has their own Hall of Fame. They call it the Hall of Heroes, and I believe he's there as well. So I think this could be a trifecta. I don't know how many people meet the trifecta of all 3, but I believe, there's Dudikoff there. So, he could be in that unique category of somebody who is in everybody's hall. I have to think Dolph Lundgren though I don't know if I see Dolph in. I would think Dolph would be in theirs, but maybe I'm not seeing him.
He's certainly in mine. He must be. He's got to be in yours.
Yeah, he's definitely in mine, and he is in. Yeah, so Dudikoff is in very rarefied territory here. That he's in 3 of the halls of fame there, because it sounds like it's him and Dolph Lundgren perhaps that might be the only ones.
Okay, I think that just about wraps things up for this show. Matt, thank you for joining me once again. Do you want to take a moment to tell people what you've got going on and where they can find you online?
Yes, absolutely. So the site is dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's really where you can find everything. There's links to Twitter, which is DTV Connoisseur, Facebook, which is Direct to Video Connoisseur. So pretty much everything's there. Also, my newest novel, Holtman Arms, that is you can find the link for that there. If you look up Holtman Arms on Google, you will find it. You also have to sift through, I don't know what they are, but like for the Holtman name, last name, I guess there's like crests of their family crests or whatever. So you kind of sift through that a little bit, but my novel will be there. One interesting connection to Soldier Boys is because of the name Brophy and that being kind of a big joke. I ended up finding out subsequent to making this film from my grandfather that actually on my grandmother's side of the family here in South Philly, when I first moved here, that there actually are family members of mine that have the last name Brophy on her side. So I discovered that. So I made a character in the novel who she's someone who's like very image conscious. She dates the main character, and she's like extremely image conscious to the point that she's embarrassed of her last name, which is actually Brophy. This is sort of I discovered I spelled it wrong though. I spelled it with an E, Brophy with an E at the between the H and E. This film does not use the E. It's just Brophy with no E. Between the H and Y. So, but that is like a small little connection to this film, is a small little inspiration that I had there.
I love the idea that you are now working within the Soldier Boys cinematic universe.
Right, exactly. Yes. Well, yeah, I didn't even think about the fact that she could have been related to that. Well, because of the spelling, maybe. I mean, maybe they changed the spelling because of the neo-Nazi path or the neo-Nazi reputation of these Brophies. They didn't want to have that connection. But and the fact that I may have family members living, mere blocks away from me, distant relatives. So if anybody's listening to this, if your last name is Brophy and you live in South Philadelphia, you can reach out, dtvconnoisseur@yahoo.com, and maybe we can grab a drink sometime or something. So, yeah.
There you go. Let's end on that happy note. As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website at explodinghelicopters.com for more reviews and information about films where helicopters explode. If you can rate, review, or retweet our stuff, we'd be very grateful. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
If I do this, I want to take some of the kids with me.
Oh, wait a minute, Tolliver. I don't know about putting kids in danger.
You want your daughter back?
Yeah, I want my daughter back.
Okay. I want a full unconditional presidential pardon for anyone who survives the mission.
We'll think of something.
One more thing, and it's not negotiable, so don't even try.
Name it.
I want a $10 million donation to California Youth Services. Scholarships, libraries, gyms, you name it.
Okay.
Smile, Prescott. It's tax deductible.